So I want to go over what the Mishnah says in relation to Yeshua, or Jesus of Nazareth's execution by the Judahite house. Now, in the Mishnah, there are a couple things that are made really clear. If you want to execute somebody, the Sanhedrin cannot reach a 71-member unanimous vote to do so. In fact, if the Sanhedrin agrees with 71 members voting in the affirmative that someone is guilty, then they have to be set free. And in the Judahite thought process, the idea is if everybody's in agreement, then it's technically not a fair trial. And even if that person is actually guilty, the truth is that the Father deals with them personally, and they will receive some form of poetic justice outside of the Torah-based court system. Now, here's another thing that adds a stipulation to that. If the Sanhedrin has 70 members voting in the affirmative, and the final member wants to vote in the negative, even though he believes that the person is guilty of the crime, in order to carry out that execution, because remember, a 70-to-1 vote would allow for an execution to be carried out. They cannot vote against what they believe honestly took place. So if they believe that the party is guilty, they have to vote that the party is guilty, even if it means that the party ends up going free. So now we have to ask the question, what does this mean for the execution of Jesus? Because clearly, according to Jewish law, if Jesus were to be executed, the 71-member Sanhedrin could not be in complete agreement. Well, we get some answers from the New Testament. In fact, there are two prominent leaders that proclaim some sort of belief in Jesus, even if they act more reserved about it according to the gospel accounts. Leaders are Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. And before we go any further, Mark chapter 14 verses 1 through 2 is the text that establishes the Sanhedrin as being primarily responsible for Yeshua's death, rather than the Romans. And Acts also makes the same indictment of the Judahite house when you look at how the apostles interacted with the people of Judea. In Mark chapter 14, verses 1 through 2, we read, "Now the Pesach, or Passover, and the festival of unleavened bread, or Chag HaMatzot, were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law, or Torah, were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him." Now, it doesn't say that the Romans were scheming to do this. It says that the Judahite house was scheming to do this, but not during the festival, or the people may riot. And John chapter 3 establishes Nicodemus as one of the members who would not have conspired to do this. In fact, if we look at the text closely, it says that Nicodemus stated, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, or Elohim. For no one could perform the signs you are doing if God or Elohim were not with him." So this is a clear proclamation of belief. And in Mark chapter 15, verses 43 through 45, Joseph of Arimathea does something that one might consider risky, especially when it comes to being persecuted by the Judahite house or potentially losing political power. In the passage we read, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, also known as the Sanhedrin, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of Elohim, or God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Yeshua's, or Jesus's, body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, or the Roman soldier, he asked him if Jesus, or Yeshua, or Yehoshua had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. Now recall when I said that the stakes were completely high when Joseph of Arimathea showed regard for what would happen to Yeshua's body. And this is why the text explicitly states that he boldly went to Pilate, because it took a lot of boldness on his part to go out of his way to recover it. Now, let's just think about this for a minute. If Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea were two members on the council that voted on Yeshua's execution, and logically they believed in Yeshua, they would have voted not guilty if a capital punishment vote had come up on Yeshua. So we don't know of any other members who may have dissented or may have not dissented, so we could at least imply that the Sanhedrin would have voted 69-2 to execute Yeshua, making it lawful under Jewish law to execute him, even though other laws in the Mishnah, which is later codified oral tradition, were violated. So hopefully this was informative, and hopefully you got blessed from this. Shalom.